After a heavy rain, a resident noticed a foul smell coming from the deserted area. When they got closer, they were horrified to see a body part sticking out of the ground, badly decomposed. The police quickly arrived at the scene and exhumed 2 bodies, identified as Armando and Marcela, who had mysteriously disappeared from a birthday party months earlier. The investigation focused on the party that night, where they had suddenly left with the excuse of being in a hurry. Now, what really happened after that night? The crime gradually unfolded, deepening everyone's curiosity. Viviana once thought she had it all. As the wife of Armando, a successful businessman, she lived in a luxurious villa in a peaceful suburb. From the outside, Viviana's life was the perfect model, with a prosperous family, luxurious parties, and the admiration of friends and relatives. However, beneath that facade, there was a lie that Viviana did not expect. The first signs came like a gentle breeze, elusive but still leaving traces. Armando, the husband she had always trusted, began to change. Long phone calls late at night, unexpected business trips, and eyes that always avoided her every time she asked. At first, Viviana reassured herself that this was just the excessive imagination of a wife who loved her husband. But the truth always had a way of appearing little by little, breaking the perfect shell of life. The one night when Armando returned home late, Viviana smelled an unfamiliar perfume lingering on his shirt, a sweet, seductive scent that was not hers. As doubts began to creep into Viviana's mind, she couldn't help but ask about the woman she had heard glimpses of several times in her husband's ambiguous stories. Though Armando, with his usual calmness, coldly denied everything, as if she were imagining things. But Viviana knew better. She had been the woman he loved, knew every detail of his habits, and now what she felt was no longer unfounded suspicion. Viviana threatened him, as a silent warning that if betrayal occurred, the outcome would not be a simple separation or divorce. The intensity of her threat made the atmosphere between them even more stifling, but Armando continued to reassure her. He embraced Viviana with a smooth lie in every gesture, telling her that he loved only her and would never betray her. However, Armando's words did not calm the anger boiling inside Viviana. From that moment on, her suspicions were no longer faint. It became a smoldering fire burning inside her. Day by day, hour by hour, and Viviana began to secretly follow Armando. She felt like a stranger in her own marriage, quietly observing and remembering her husband's every gesture, every look, every word. Finally, the truth that Viviana feared also appeared clearly and cruelly. One morning, when Armando hurriedly left the house, she secretly checked his phone, which he always kept close to him, and what she discovered cut off all the strings that held her heart. In the message box, there were a series of loving words, intimate images between Armando and a beautiful young woman named Marcela. The secret dates, the hotel meetings, the sweet words of love that he once reserved for Viviana now belonged to Marcela. The initial pain quickly turned into deep hatred. Viviana looked at the photos on her phone, her hands shaking but her eyes filled with hatred. We couldn't bear the thought of this woman taking away everything that belonged to her: happiness, trust, and honor. Viviana began to follow the two like a ghost in the dark, collecting every piece of information, every trace of this affair, every step they took, every time they met. She knew. In her head, a plan gradually formed, meticulous and perfect. And she wouldn't just expose this betrayal, she would make them pay. Viviana had planned this night for months. She had gathered enough evidence of the affair and exposed all the lies of her husband and Marcela in front of their loved ones at this birthday party. It will be a dramatic night where their dark secrets will be exposed. Each lie will be exposed before everyone's eyes. She had prepared every detail, from the photos, the text messages that she had secretly collected over the past months, to the perfect words that would shock everyone. Her plan was to expose Armando and Marcela, to bring them down publicly in front of all the people they had deceived. Her pain would be paid back with their humiliation and defeat. That was Viviana's original goal. And tonight, at their son's birthday party, Viviana decided that the moment had come. The congratulations and laughter of the guests could not hide the collapse that was silently preparing to erupt. Everything at this party, from the decorations to the menu, from the greetings to the curious glances, was arranged by Viviana like a play that she was the director. She had prepared for this moment for a long time, and now it was about to happen. As soon as Marcela entered the house, a sudden change occurred in Viviana's heart. Marcela's confident gaze, her brazen attitude as if she was entering her own house, made Viviana's plan more complicated. Viviana felt not only betrayed, but also that Marcela was taking over her entire life, from her house, her family, to her beloved son. As Marcela approached Viviana's son, her natural gestures seemed to affirm something. Viviana stood at a distance, observing every move, feeling her heart stop beating. The resentment in Viviana's heart was no longer just the pain of being betrayed, but the feeling that everything that belonged to her was gradually being taken over. The emotions that had been suppressed for a long time began to erupt, pushing her to the limit of her endurance. Viviana's original plan was to expose the truth, but now everything had changed. She no longer wanted Armando and Marcela to be humiliated in front of everyone. She wanted them to feel the pain she had endured, to take revenge in a more brutal way. In that moment, she knew that exposing the truth would not be enough. She needed to destroy them, destroy everything they had worked so hard to build in secret. Every emotion in Viviana had turned into coldness and uncontrollable anger. She knew she would not stop at just denouncing them. This hatred needed a more bloody end. Viviana no longer wanted to simply expose the truth. She wanted to witness the downfall of Armando and Marcela, bit by bit, right in the house that Marcela was confidently marching to take over. Viviana's eyes were no longer filled with hatred, but with the fury of someone betrayed to the core, who would not stop until her pain was returned 100-fold. Viviana's son's birthday party was still going on in full swing. Laughter and music filled the cozy evening air. Children were playing in the garden. Guests were chatting happily. The atmosphere was filled with happiness. But inside Viviana, a silent storm was brewing. She looked around, her eyes stopping at the corner of the room, where Armando and Marcela were standing whispering to each other. Marcela's hand gently grasped Armando's arm, and a meaningful look was exchanged between them. Not long after, Marcela approached Armando quietly but urgently, whispering something in his ear. Armando nodded, his eyes flashing with confusion, as if they were trying to hide something. The moment of waiting had come, when Viviana was about to reveal all the evidence of Armando's infidelity. When the two hurriedly walked out of the crowd, Armando, with a tense expression, quickly made an excuse to the guests that there was urgent business to take care of. Both of them walked at a fast pace, not wanting anyone to notice the abnormality in their actions. Viviana, standing in the center of the party, watched their every move. She tried to remain calm, but inside, a wave of resentment was rising violently. Each of their footsteps seemed to stab deep into her heart, stirring up a feeling of betrayal, which she clearly felt her husband's hypocrisy and Marcela's brazenness, a woman who was defying her right in her own home. They disappeared through the main door, leaving the guests at the party unaware of what was going on. Viviana stood silently, her eyes still on the door where they had just disappeared. Her fingers tightened on the glass in her hand, but she remained calm. The anger did not explode outward, but quietly accumulated, waiting. Although her heart was filled with bitterness, Viviana still finished her son's birthday party with a smile on her lips. We did not let anyone discover the unrest happening inside her. The children continued to play, the friends continued to chat, and the party seemed to continue in a happy atmosphere. After the birthday party, no one saw Armando and Marcela again. At first, people thought they were busy or on a business trip. But as the days passed without any sign of them, rumors began to spread. Friends, relatives, and even colleagues gradually expressed their concern. No one answered the phone. No one responded to messages. Both of them seemed to have disappeared from life. Viviana continued her life with a calm demeanor, but deep in her eyes, something harsh was forming. No one understood this sudden disappearance except her. She had a premonition after the party, but no one expected their absence to last so long. When the disappearance became unbearable, Armando's family contacted the police. An investigation was opened to clarify what happened to the two. Police cars began to appear around the villa. Detectives quietly investigated, looking for clues. They checked every corner of Armando and Marcela's house, but there was no trace of forced entry or rape. The furniture was intact. There was no sign of a fight. Everything looked like the two had voluntarily disappeared without a trace. Viviana, facing the police, appeared to be completely cooperative. She answered all the questions calmly, explaining that her husband had a work plan but did not share many details with her. However, Viviana's eyes could not hide the coldness and gloom in her soul. The police quietly took notes, but could not find any connection between this wife and the disappearance. Meanwhile, all leads lead to a wall of stalemate. The last friends who saw them at the birthday party confirmed that both Armando and Marcela had left the party in a hurry, claiming to have an emergency. But since then, no one has heard anything about their whereabouts. Their disappearance gradually became a mystery, and as the days passed, the shadow of fear loomed over their families and acquaintances. The investigation into Armando and Marcela's disappearance dragged on for months, drawing the attention of the entire community. At first, the police focused on the most obvious leads, checking their travel records, checking their phones, and checking any evidence that might link them to the two. But everything else seemed to be in the dark. There was no trace of them after the night of the birthday party, and people gradually became desperate when they could not find any concrete evidence. During the first months, Viviana remained calm. She lived a quiet life and continued to care for her children, but no one seemed to notice the harshness behind her appearance. However, her calmness did not escape the detectives, and they began to suspect that she knew more than she was letting on. The investigation remained deadlocked until a strange detail was suddenly discovered. One morning, after a heavy rain, a group of gardeners in the suburbs near Viviana's villa stumbled upon a foul odor coming from a vacant lot. The stench became stronger as they approached a depression that had collapsed due to the rain. As they dug deeper, they discovered a strange object, a white cloth covered in mud, and underneath it was a hand protruding from the ground. The police were immediately called to the scene. When they excavated the area, they found two badly decomposed bodies, but based on their clothes and other remains, it was not difficult to recognize that they were Armando and Marcela. The position and state of the bodies made the police shudder. It seemed that they had been brutally murdered before being buried. The bruises and traces of violence on their bodies suggested that this was a premeditated murder, not an accident or suicide. News of the discovery quickly spread, and public attention focused on Viviana, the last person to see the two victims before they disappeared. Although she had previously cooperated with the police, the fact that the two bodies were discovered so close to her villa made her the focus of suspicion. Interrogations became more thorough, and under increasing pressure, Viviana gradually lost her composure. During the lengthy interrogation, the detectives questioned her about her true relationship with her husband, as well as the motive for their mysterious disappearance. They began to bring up small details that had been overlooked at first: signs of Viviana's resentment and hatred towards Marcela and Armando, and the strange disappearance of both of them after the party. These seemingly harmless pieces of information gradually connected, forming a picture of a cruel and premeditated revenge plan. Under the pressure of irrefutable evidence, Viviana's face began to show signs of tension. At first, she denied any involvement, maintaining her usual calm demeanor, but her eyes gradually filled with resentment when mentioning Armando and Marcela. Viviana couldn't hide it any longer. She began to confess little by little about the night when everything got out of control. Rishi said that after months of secretly watching and enduring Armando's betrayal, she had planned to expose the truth in front of the jury, to expose all the lies of Armando and Marcela. But when she sent an anonymous message to Marcela hoping that she would come alone, Armando appeared with her. The appearance of both of them drove Viviana into an uncontrollable frenzy. Viviana had prepared everything in advance. That night, when the party ended, she quietly left the house, following the two into the dark forest. Her anger exploded when she saw Armando and Marcela laughing happily, holding hands as if nothing had happened. In the thick darkness of the forest, Viviana couldn't hold back any longer. The cruel hatred and madness took over her entire mind. She pulled out the knife she had hidden in her coat and charged straight at Armando and Marcela in a blind rage. She stabbed them without hesitation. They both fell, blood spraying the forest, and Viviana stood there panting in rage. But when it was all over, Viviana regained consciousness, but all she saw were the two corpses lying motionless at her feet. She had no regrets. She had vented all her hatred on the traitor and his lover, as if that was the only way to free herself from the pain that had tormented her for the past months. But Viviana's confession shocked everyone. Even the police could not believe the cruelty of her actions. From a woman who loved her family, Viviana had become a cold-blooded killer, haunted executed by Armando's pain and betrayal. That night, she had planned the perfect revenge, and there was not a moment's hesitation when she carried out her brutal actions. But Viviana's rage, her cruelty in the dark of night, ended the lives of Armando and Marcela, turning that peaceful villa into the scene of an unforgettable tragedy. After Viviana confessed to her crimes, the court proceeded to her trial, which was met with overwhelming evidence of premeditated murder. Based on the brutality of the crime, the premeditation of her actions, and her lack of remorse, The court sentenced Viviana to life in prison without parole. Rishi must spend the rest of her life in prison facing up to her actions and the tragic consequences she caused. The court's decision reflects the fairness and severity of crimes that are especially cruel and calculated like Viviana's.